This video and all others are brought to you one day earlier on Libri.tv. They actually pay us. If you're familiar with this channel since its inception, you may have known that before doing all the content in this, let's call it English, I tend to call it what somebody that learned to talk in a Scottish accent from the intro of Ultima Underworld considers an English accent to be. We used to do shows in a defunct language called Romanian. People don't use it anymore, sadly. And one of the first shows I did on this channel for Raul was one about how there's nobody left at Ubisoft that can make a proper game. I'm not sure if that video is still viewable on the channel. If it's in Romanian, it's probably hidden. We tried to put subtitles on them for a while, but it used to be a very time-consuming process because you had to manually sync the dialogue with the text. Apparently now you just drop in a file and it does it for you, which is something we could have used 4 years ago. But if it's still there, you can probably see it quite easily. It has a terrible thumbnail that I really did not want. I absolutely told him to not use that thumbnail. He used it anyway for clickbait. I think it worked because a lot of Ubisoft employees got really upset with us, which is fine. Here's part 2. Now, the context of the previous video was that before 2016, Ubisoft had kind of become a shovelware delivery system where they would just regurgitate the same game, like pretty much the exact same game, barely any differences across several different franchises and genres. I mean, they put the tower climbing mechanic of revealing a map, you know, from Assassin's Creed, they also use in Far Cry, they put it in The Crew, a racing game with towers. I reinstalled The Crew recently, so I'm recently upset about this again, because I wanted to see, has The Crew changed for the better in the intervening time that I haven't played it, and, you know, since The Crew 2 came out as well? No, it hasn't. It still has a magnificently beautiful world, unless it's daytime outside, that you can just enjoy driving around, ignoring all of the gameplay, all of the missions, all of the story, all of the everything. It's a tourism game, a good tourism game. Tourism simulator, actually. It's a walking sim, but with cars. The game aspect of it is trash. It's actually more trash now than it was when it came out, when the beta came out. When the beta came out, had a lot of problems. A lot of rough edge, like seeing that story there, man, that just terrified me. But it did have some neat features, like cars would take damage, and if you didn't fix them, they would get progressively worse to drive, so people were incentivized to, you know, drive, and they took it out. Yeah, they took that completely out. There's no damage anymore. Like, it's just aesthetic. It's... Oh, the physics in that game are just trash. So anyway, back to the idea of Ubisoft. Something happened around 2016. Something I call the fear of Vivendi. The giant, I think it's French, multinational entity, media entity called Vivendi, the one that used to own Blizzard when they didn't suck, was trying to buy Ubisoft. They bought their sister studio Gameloft, which makes mobile games, and they switched around the leadership there, and that's something that the people at Ubisoft did not want to see happen to their studio. So they had a contingency plan that if Vivendi manages to buy enough of them to trigger a buyout, all the heads of the studio, all the top level creative people, they would just leave, leaving the studio a shell of its former self. Now, at the time, I didn't see that as being a problem because after seeing the games they have been making for the past several years, there were no creative people at the studio left, not in charge of anything. The creative ones were the artists, you know, making the incredibly detailed, magnificent scenery and stuff, and the music, the graphics, and, you know, the things that you notice first and foremost, that's on the box, not the gameplay that is trash and stories that are trash and the monetization that is trash. But because of that fear of Vivendi, Ubisoft did something I didn't think would be possible. it actually tried. When they released Rainbow Six Siege before the Fear of Vivendi, the game was horrible. It barely worked. But after that fear set in, it became amazing. It became one of the best competitive FPS games out there. The crew, didn't, but you can't ask for miracles now, can you? They even delayed Assassin's Creed for a year so they wouldn't make the same game again, and when they released it they made The Witcher 3, but still it's not the exact same game as before, so it's something. They did something. They haven't told me in the past couple of years that I'm supposed to get a video card because they can't bother to optimize the games, or well, they're probably gonna do that with the Watch Dogs Legion, and they haven't insisted so far since the previous incident that 30 frames a second is better, or that it's just a number, that doesn't matter. So it seemed like things were getting better, that Ubisoft was actually, trying. And then Vivendi stopped their buyout and Tencent basically nabbed up everything that Vivendi had. And Ubisoft released a sigh of relief, an audible one that you could notice in their games. In The Crew 2, that was a loot box fiasco thing that I'm not sure why it's there. In Ghost Recon Breakpoint, which is sort of like Wildlands but worse. And Wildlands was the apology for The Division. And The Division 2, which exists. And they've kinda started to ruin Rainbow Six Siege now by remaking all the good maps into bad maps. One of the main attractions of the game was the destructible environment and locations that were real. Like, there was a house with a front door, with bedrooms that had windows. They don't have that anymore. I mean, who would use windows in a bedroom or a front door? What is this? Communist China? You can't have a front door on a house. What if the government comes in? I guess, I don't know why they took it out. Probably some stupid thing with the multiplayer competitive community, which tends to ruin most games always. Oh god, I hate competitive online communities. They're the same people that ruined Jedi Knight with their pokes and their waggles. But back to Ubisoft. Recently, there came a lot of accusations against some people in the company. A lot of them, and I mean a whole lot of them. Super lot of them. Like, boy, is this enlightening. Now, even though the company a while ago said it changed its something team to make the games a bit more different, I think that was just a preview of what was to come when the reality of what's going on at the company came out. That the top brass is composed of terrible human beings that should have never been put in a position of power over everyone. Or anyone for that matter. And I'm not just talking about the sexual harassment. That's something that was supposed to land them in jail a while ago, or at least have resulted in a restraining order or some sensitivity training, some classes maybe, instead of bonuses and the adulation of the CEO and founder. The people responsible for all those things, well, some of them, they're more being investigated now. Some of the people responsible for those were people like Suresh Haskwe, who was the chief creative officer of the company, who's accused of... well, he's been there for 30 years, more than 30 years, and he's supposedly drugged his employees at one point, forced them to drink until they puked, made allegations against the ones that wouldn't drink, pressuring them to drink, or branding as abnormal the people that would not fall in line with his vision, with his ideas. And this guy was the creative director of the company. So I have the sneaky, super duper, spyish mega suspicion that if you ever said, hey, how about we not include, microtransactions in the single player, that would kind of make the progression of the single player kind of terrible, and maybe not put towers that reveal the map in the racing game. I kind of get the feeling that this guy's the one that came up with those and would probably try to make your life a living hell. But hey, I guess you were free to quit in this economy that's built around the idea that the young cannot quit. They cannot afford to live as their parents did with just one job. They need two of them, sometimes maybe three. There is no quitting. You're just gonna suck it up. Take everything the old farts give you and hope it's not a bullet. And they know it, so they can be as evil as they want to. They have all the strings, all the money, all the property. And this guy was the chief creative officer of the company. The HR division of Ubisoft was basically there to just protect him from the people he abused. Isn't that awesome? Boy, this sure is a healthy games industry we have here, isn't it? It's superb. It's just filled with assholes like this one, making games worse and being rewarded for it, and then be allowed free range to treat other people in ways that would get them thrown out of a window in a civilized world. Yes, I'm still mad about the crew. I'll always still be mad about the crew. Now, he wasn't the only one that got discovered in giant quotation marks. A bunch of people were at the company, and a lot of them are either suspended or have announced that they have quit. And as I've said, Ubisoft has hired an external auditing team to investigate 20 other individuals. It's probably gonna come out at one point, unless the media gets bored by this again. I see that they're on the Dr. Disrespect PR train right now and haven't really paid attention to what's happening here anymore. But if more information were to come out, I would say that possibly a lot of the heads of the company will be found as being responsible for all sorts of terrible, horrible things. You know, the kind of people that would have left Ubisoft if Vivendi took over. The kind of people that only started making better decisions for their games so that people would be more on their side, more vocal to protect Ubisoft. Because look, Ubisoft, they made Rainbow Six Siege a really good game. They're also the ones that released it in a really bad state, and also the ones that told me, well, every game has hackers, why should ours be different? But hey, they fixed it eventually. It's an amazing, well, they ruined House. They ruined House so badly, and Hereford Base is an atrocious mess. But back to the idea. This isn't new information for Ubisoft. Ubisoft knows about this. Ubisoft has hidden this from the general public for years, decades. They knew that if Vivendi came along, they would have their own auditing, HR, and everything else. They would have fired them and probably, possibly, hopefully help the employees, file charges against them, which is why instead of Vivendi, they were happy to go with Tencent, because Tencent doesn't care. Why would it? It's here to make money. Actually, no, they have started their own AAA game studio recently, so they're gonna make games as well. But at this time, Ubisoft is kind of imploding. Now, you may say that maybe these are baseless accusations. I mean, what evidence do they have? I don't know. I didn't go out and talk to the people accusing these other individuals, but I have tangential evidence that it's true, in the form of Ubisoft employees telling me, well, maybe they wanted to be sexually harassed, and some people that I'm convinced are Ubisoft employees but don't have that written anywhere in the description. When you get to that kind of argument, to the, well, maybe he was standing in front of the bullet. I mean, you couldn't expect the bullet to curve around him. I mean, bullets can't do that. When you get into that kind of argument, you're already admitting that the crime happened. So I have little doubt that these people are responsible for this, and probably much more that will maybe never come to light, because it's kind of hard when you're a small, tiny cog in a giant machine. Oh, sure, you've got the internet now, you've got your YouTubes, you've got your Facebooks, you've got your Twitters, but unless there's like a wave that you can ride, like lots of people doing this at the same time, so that the bigger media notices and, propagates it, and doesn't just get bored and publishes articles about some millionaire streamer that nobody should care about, you don't really have a lot of, footing on this, or all of odds of success, especially since the company itself hushes up everything, probably slaps you with an NDA, tells you it's being investigated, don't tell others, this may affect the investigation. And if you're in the crowd that's saying, well, what does this matter, it won't affect me as the consumer, I won't get better games. You will. Even if you're that psychotic, there is an upside for you as well. You will get better games. Again, when Ubisoft was afraid, when the top brass were afraid that they would be fired and not be in the position they are, Ubisoft started making good things, started being a better company. Now that it's no longer afraid, it went back to doing what it always does. Canceling Beyond Good and Evil 2, which hopefully won't happen, but they have been dicks to Michel Ancel before, so it could happen. But if all the assholes do get fired because their assholeness, because their heads got up so deep into their assholeness that they couldn't see the light of day anymore, the company, could mistreat its employees less. They could probably do a better job then when they're not being abused. Good ideas could actually be rewarded and implemented, and maybe working at a big company like Ubisoft wouldn't be probably a nightmare, actually, when you think about it. Now, if the whole employees being abused by their bosses doesn't seem like something wrong to you, then you're probably living in my neck of the woods, because here it's kind of expected that the boss will absolutely do everything possible, short of physically killing you, to, make your life worse. That's how things roll around here in the Soviet bloc, where everybody dreams themselves a Ceausescu, a Stalin, a Putin, where it's my way or the highway. Actually, no, there is no highway. We don't have any of these, because we've all had the leaders that were all absolute monsters, and then think, oh yeah, we may need a highway. Actually, no, don't build highways, then people will move. They'd probably go to some place where people aren't assholes to them, so keep them here, yeah. No infrastructure for you. Local barons instead, yeah. Local barons are good. I mean, it did wonders for Arrakis. I'm not sure what the future holds for Ubisoft. Will they finally decide how they pronounce their name? Will they change their logo from poop to something else? The old armadillo was nice. The old armadillo was very nice. I think it was an armadillo. It was something. But most of all, you just kind of have to wonder, what other stuff are assholes in other companies getting away with? You kind of look at Activision and think, man, these guys, they probably have a lot of assholes. In Electronic Arts used to be famous for its employee dungeons where they would whip programmers. At least that's how I pictured them in my head when the EA Spouse thing came out. And it's important to remember that the people usually committing these abuses, they get paid quite a lot, so even if they get fired, they'll be just fine. They have a golden parachute made out of real gold. The employees, however, they are the people working at Blizzard still sleeping in their cars? You get the picture, hopefully. I mean, I know that some of you do not get the picture. I've talked to some of the people that don't get the picture. I've seen campaigns organized by some of the people that don't get the picture. And it makes me think that maybe not everybody should be allowed on the internet. Actually, I've thought this since before I was on the internet, because I've seen what people were doing on there and I was horrified. I mean, you have all the knowledge of the human race in one place, the ability to talk to everybody and anybody at any point on the planet. And what do you waste that on? What do you waste it on? You're watching a video of some guy going on about a car game nobody cares about and about a company. Jesus, you could be using this to save the world. You're using it for nothing important, just noise that's not going to help anyone. Midnight was 20 years ago.